Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. This one's gonna hit different. It happened on one of those thick Georgia summer nights, the kind where the air smells like magnolia and charcoal, and you forget the world has edges. We were out back at our house in Savannah. String lights draped between the oak branches, cold drinks sweating on every flat surface, 30-something friends laughing and leaning into each other like we had all the time left in the world. My wife, Diana, was near the edge of the deck. She had a glass of red wine raised slightly in front of her, the way she always held it when she was about to say something that mattered. She was beautiful, warm-eyed and sharp-tongued, the woman I'd spent 12 years building a life with, the woman whose laugh I could pick out of any crowd. "You know what I've been thinking about lately?" she said, her voice carrying just a little too far. A few heads turned. I was mid-laugh, hand halfway toward my beer. Something in my chest went still. "I've been thinking about how important it is to know yourself," she continued, her voice climbing with the kind of forced calm that people use when they've rehearsed something. "And when it's time to stop pretending. Even in marriage." The laughter around the deck died all at once. I didn't move. My hand was still extended toward my drink. The air had been sucked out of the yard. I said, barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" She didn't look at me, just tilted the wine glass slightly, like a toast to some invisible audience. "I'm just being honest, Ryan. I think we both felt this for a while. I need to start living for me. That includes this marriage." I set my beer down, slowly, deliberately. Every pair of eyes on the deck was now watching us like we were a car crash they couldn't look away from. "Respect," I repeated, the word sharp in my mouth as I stepped toward her. "Is that what this is? Or is this a performance?" Her confidence flickered, just barely, but I saw it. Her grip on the stem of her glass tightened. "I didn't mean for it to come out like this." "No, you meant it exactly like this," I said, low, even but unrelenting. "You picked the stage. You raised the curtain. So say it again. Just to me this time, not to them." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "I want a divorce." A few hushed sounds scattered through the group. Someone's phone buzzed awkwardly. The fire pit crackled. "For what?" I asked, voice quiet, but each word like a stone placed with care. "Because you didn't have the courage to say it when it was just the two of us." "Because I'm exhausted, Ryan." She finally met my eyes. "I've been screaming inside this marriage for years, and you never once looked up from whatever was in front of you." I held her gaze for a long moment. "So instead of coming to me, you came to them." I gestured toward the frozen faces of our friends. "You used our life as a confessional." Her lip trembled, but she didn't back down. "I crossed the line because you didn't even know where it was anymore." That one landed. Not because it was cruel, but because part of me recognized it. I took a step back and adjusted my collar. "You could have talked to me first. You didn't. You chose the audience over the conversation. Whatever truth you're chasing, Diana, I hope it's worth what you just burned." The deck emptied quickly after that. Muttered excuses, half hugs, the sound of car doors clicking shut in the driveway. Diana went inside without another word. I stayed on the deck for a long time, staring at the orange glow of the fire pit as it faded, listening to the cicadas fill the space where our life used to be. That was the night everything split. But the betrayal wasn't the announcement. The announcement was just the beginning. Back inside, the house was holding its breath. Diana stood in the kitchen, arms folded, one strap of her blouse slipping off her shoulder. She hadn't changed. Same dress from the party. Same expression, not guilty, not soft, just braced. "You could have told me anywhere," I said, walking in slow. "Why there?" I didn't plan it out like a script. "You raised your glass like a toast and then emptied a grenade into my lap," I replied. "That's not something that just happens." She turned away slightly, pressing her hands flat on the counter. "If I told you in private, you would have managed me. You always do. You'd have talked me in circles, made promises, and 6 months later nothing would have changed. I would have listened." "No," she said sharply, turning to face me. "You would have handled me like a problem, not like a woman who's been begging to be heard." I leaned back against the refrigerator. "So your answer was to dismantle our marriage like a press release." She flinched, just a flicker. "I didn't want to lie to our friends anymore." "But humiliating me," I said softer now, "that was fine." Her lip trembled, but her voice stayed steady. I crossed the line because you stopped seeing where it was. I stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was just stunned, not by the words, by the emptiness behind them. Like she'd told herself this story so many times she'd stopped checking whether it was still true. I don't know who I'm talking to, I said quietly. You used to talk to me like I was home. She said nothing, just turned away and ran a hand through her hair. You said you were screaming in this marriage. I stepped closer. I believe you, but I was in the same room, and what I heard was silence. She didn't answer. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. I'll sleep at the apartment. She turned. What apartment? I got one last year, I said, not looking back. In case you ever stop talking to me for good. I pulled the front door shut behind me. No slam, just the soft, deliberate click of something sealing itself closed. A week later, I sat alone in a glass-walled conference room on the east side of Savannah. The city moved beyond the window like nothing had happened. The paralegal had offered coffee. I said no. There was already enough bitterness in my mouth. Diana was 47 minutes late, then an hour. Then she wasn't coming at all. No call, no text, not even a passive running behind. I'd sent her a message that morning. Simple. Meeting at 2 p.m., more in Langley. Let's finish this cleanly. She'd read it, left me undelivered. I slid the papers back into the envelope, nodded at the receptionist, and walked out. By the time I reached my apartment complex, Unit 14B, furnished, modest, temporary, the sun was going down behind the palmetto trees. I left the lights off when I walked in, stood in the dark for a moment, and let the silence settle. I hadn't packed much when I'd left the house the week before. Clothes, documents, my shaving kit, an old guitar I hadn't touched in 2 years. But now I sat on the edge of the bed and understood something clearly. I wasn't packing for a night. I was packing to leave. I drove back to the house, close to 8. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Probably at her sister's. Or maybe just gone. Inside, everything was frozen where we'd left it. Half-melted candles, one wine glass in the sink, her cardigan still draped over the arm of the couch like it didn't want to go either. I walked upstairs, packed a single duffel bag, and stood for a moment in our closet staring at the row of shirts I wouldn't need here anymore. I didn't cry, not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing left to squeeze out. The silence didn't scream anymore. It just watched me. I locked the front door and turned once to look back at the house. Then I walked. 3 weeks passed. Some mornings it still felt like I just left for a long work trip and would come home to Diana's voice from the kitchen. But that day never came, so I stopped waiting for it. I settled into routine the way you settle into cold water, all at once, until it felt normal. Up at 6, black coffee, 40 minutes at the gym 3 blocks over. Into the office by 8:30. Evenings, I walked the squares near the riverfront. Let the old city air move through my head. I wasn't lonely. I was just light, unmoored in a way that was, strangely, something close to peace. One Saturday, I met up with my friends Marcus and Troy, guys I'd barely seen since the wedding. We grabbed lunch at a place we used to haunt before life got complicated. Marcus leaned back in his chair, mid-conversation, and grinned. Man, you look like someone took a 50-pound bag off your back. Troy snorted. Diana always kept impressed. She didn't press me, I said, tapping my glass. I pressed myself. I just finally stopped. They didn't push. I appreciated that. But every conversation with someone who knew us back then eventually found its way to her. Marcus had asked, careful as he could be, "You two working anything out?" I shook my head. She hasn't called once. And it was true. Diana had gone completely dark after skipping the law office meeting. No follow-up. No nudge through a lawyer. Nothing. Like she'd lit the fuse, then walked away from the explosion and never looked back. I told myself she needed time. That grief sometimes goes quiet before it speaks. But after 3 weeks of nothing, I stopped translating. One evening I sat on a bench near the riverfront and watched a couple walk past, laughing about something small and domestic. I didn't envy them. I didn't miss what they had. But I did wonder how many quiet moments like that Diana and I had let slip past us. How many mornings we'd let become wallpaper. I stood up, shoved my hands in my pockets, and whispered something I hadn't planned. I hope she finds what she's looking for. It wasn't bitter. It was just true. It was a Tuesday, one of those muggy Savannah afternoons when the heat sits on your shoulders like a coat you can't take off. I was in line at Sullivan's Deli off Broughton Street when I heard my name. Ryan. I turned, and there was Carter Webb, same lopsided grin, still wearing that ridiculous oversized watch he'd had since college. We shook hands and ended up splitting a two-top by the window. He asked about work. I asked about his kids. And about halfway through his sandwich, he cleared his throat. Hey, I don't know if anyone told you. About Dee's mom. My jaw tightened. I kept my eyes on my plate. Carter hesitated. She had a stroke. That same morning, the day you were waiting at the lawyer's office. Diana was at Memorial Hospital all day. I finally looked up. She should have told you, he added quickly. I know that. I just thought you should know the reason. I sat back, folded the napkin, and nodded once. She didn't tell me. Carter looked down at his plate. I think she panicked. She wasn't. I raised a hand gently, stopping him. I'm not looking for explanations anymore, I said. Not cold, not harsh, just clear. I'm past the part where her reasons change anything for me. Carter nodded slowly. That's probably the healthiest thing I've heard in a while. I picked up my sandwich. Only took me 12 years and a full collapse to get there. He laughed, an actual laugh, and it broke the weight of the conversation just enough. We finished lunch mostly in silence. And when we stood to leave, he gripped my shoulder. You look good, man. Like someone who finally put something down. I nodded. I'm lighter. Diana's mother having a stroke. That was hard to sit with. It twisted things in ways I hadn't prepared for. But the strange part? It didn't change anything. Because if Diana couldn't reach for her phone in the middle of all that, when everything was already breaking, then maybe we'd already been strangers before that night on the deck ever happened. What do you owe a stranger who used to love you? You wish them peace. And then you walk on. 5 months later, it was a rooftop in downtown Savannah. Marcus's birthday. Low music, warm lights, the smell of sliders, and someone's good cologne drifting off the breeze. I hadn't planned to stay long. And then I saw her. Diana was near the far railing, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Her hair was shorter now, darker. Her dress was simple, navy clean. She looked different, older maybe, or maybe I was just seeing her without the story I used to put around her. She noticed me before I could decide what to do. Our eyes met across the rooftop, and she paused mid-sentence. After a beat, she made her way over. Hey, she said, barely audible over the music. Hey, I replied. Calm, not cold. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I didn't expect to see you here. Marcus and I go way back, I said. She nodded. You look well. We stood there for a moment, the city below us, the lights of the river in the distance. Two people who used to share a world. I left the museum, she said finally. I'm a nonprofit now. It's slower, more honest work. I nodded. That sounds like a good fit. She studied me, her voice softer. I've been thinking about a lot of things. About the divorce. She paused. I know how I handled things. I disappeared. I wasn't fair. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, we still haven't filed. Technically, we're still married. Her face shifted. I know. It's time, I said. We need to finish this. Clean and final. She swallowed. You're right. Of course. I looked out at the city for a moment, then back at her. This wasn't meant to drag on. You said what you needed to say. I made my peace with that. Now, we closed the chapter properly. Dinah looked like she wanted to say something more, but all she did was nod. And then, almost to herself, Matt, she caught the name of someone else, someone from a different version of herself, and stopped. Just shook her head. I gave her one quiet nod. Final, but not unkind. Then I stepped back into the party, drink in hand. She watched me go. I didn't turn around. Some chapters don't end with a door slamming. They just stop being written. 3 weeks after the rooftop, I met Naomi. It was a Saturday afternoon. Light rain, the kind Savannah does softly, in a used record shop on Jones Street. She was reaching for the same Otis Redding album I'd been eyeing. We laughed, let each other have a look, and ended up walking across the street for coffee. What I remember most wasn't the music or the coffee. It was how easy she was to talk to. Naomi had this steadiness to her. Thoughtful without trying, curious without prying. She was a freelance photographer, lived in Midtown, spent her weekends hiking with her elderly rescue hound, Biscuit. Her laugh was warm, and her silences were comfortable. She looked like someone who had chosen peace and earned it. We didn't rush. Within a few meetups, something quiet had started between us. Sunday walks, long conversations over dinner, the kind of slow build that feels more real because it isn't trying to be anything. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. Then one afternoon, we were sitting in a small cafe near Forsyth Park. Rain on the windows, indie jazz from the speakers. Naomi was telling me about a time she'd photographed a food festival and accidentally walked into a cooking competition with her camera bag. Got recruited as a judge for a dish she later described as tasting like warm carpet and regret. I was laughing so hard my coffee nearly went sideways when I felt it. That shift in the room. I glanced past Naomi's shoulder. Diana. She was in the corner by the window, a half-finished cappuccino in front of her, a book in her hands she clearly wasn't reading. Her eyes were on me. Not angry, not dramatic, just still, like someone who'd been mid-thought and forgotten how to finish it. I held her gaze for 1 second. Then I looked back at Naomi. So what happened after the carpet dish? I asked. Naomi grinned. The host asked me if I'd consider a career change. I told him photography was safer for everyone involved. I laughed, truly laughed, and I could feel Diana's eyes like a low heat at the edge of the room. But the knot in my chest that used to tighten in those moments didn't budge. No panic, no longing, no urge to fix anything. At one point, Naomi leaned forward to brush something off my sleeve. I glanced past her briefly. Diana had looked down. Her hands were wrapped around her cup. Her book had fallen closed in her lap. I didn't wave. I didn't walk over. I didn't even nod. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because that moment didn't belong to her anymore. It was mine. We finished our drinks, stepped out into the drizzle, and laughed when neither of us had brought an umbrella. I held my jacket over Naomi's head as we jogged to the car. I never looked back. By fall, the light in Savannah had shifted to that softer amber haze that makes even ordinary streets look like something out of a painting. The air had cooled. So had things with Naomi. There was no blow-up, just drift. The quiet kind, where the silences get a little longer each week until you both realize the conversation has already ended. We met for a final lunch, both knowing what it was. She said she was grateful we'd met. I echoed it. We hugged twice. That was that. It didn't break me. It just felt like a road I'd wandered down only to find it didn't lead anywhere new. Then, on a gray Wednesday, Diana's name appeared on my phone. Ryan, can we get coffee? No pressure. Old place. Just a talk. The first message in months. No context. No follow-up. I stared at the screen for a long time. I almost didn't reply. But there was something in the simplicity of it. Not hope, not drama, just unfinished business that made me say yes. She was already there when I arrived at the little cafe on Whitaker Street, the one we'd claimed as ours in the early years. Same crooked stools at the counter, same faded mural near the back. She was in a corner booth, fiddling with the edge of her napkin. She looked up when she saw me and stood halfway, unsure whether a hug was welcome. I gave her a nod and sat down. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. Curiosity, I replied. She almost smiled, then folded her hands in front of her. I'm sorry, Ryan. The words sat there, plain bare, nothing around them. No justification, no defensiveness. I handled everything wrong. The way I announced it, the way I disappeared after. I've gone over that night 1,000 times trying to understand who that version of me was. She paused. I think I was trying to punish you for things I never found the courage to name. But honestly, I think I was mostly punishing myself. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. I turned our life into theater, and you were both the audience and the target. I know that, and I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it out loud. Her voice cracked just barely. I'm sorry for the way I treated someone who only ever gave me steady love. A long moment passed between us. I accept your apology, I said finally, quiet but unmovable. But that doesn't undo what happened. I know, she whispered. I'm not asking it to. I reached for my wallet, slid a bill under the salt shaker, and stood. I hope you find what you're looking for, Diana. She looked up. Her lips parted. Nothing came. I walked out. Behind me, through the glass door, I heard it, that muffled, restrained sound of someone trying very hard not to cry in public. I kept walking, because some things aren't cruel. They're just the truth, finally given its rightful weight. A few days later, another message. Ryan, if you're willing, could you come by the house? There's something I want you to see. I promise it's not about us. I stared at it. The house. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the night I'd packed my bag and sealed the door behind me. I told myself I didn't need closure, but I went anyway. I pulled into the driveway just after 6. The porch light was on. Diana opened the door before I could knock and stepped aside without a word. I walked in slowly. The house smelled the same. Cedar and something sweet, the lemongrass candle she used on weekends. My jacket was still hanging on the hook by the door. I stopped. You never moved anything. She stood a few feet behind me, voice low. I couldn't. At first, I told myself I just hadn't had time. Then it became something else. I moved through the living room. The bookshelves were untouched. Even the water ring from one of my mugs was still on the coffee table, like the house had decided to preserve every evidence of me. In the kitchen, the whiteboard calendar was still frozen on the week she'd announced the divorce. Her voice was quieter now. I come in here every morning, make coffee in the same spot, and I still reach for your mug before I catch myself. She looked down at the hem of her sleeve. I didn't bring you here to ask for anything, Ryan. I just wanted you to see that I never threw you away. A pause. Her voice cracked slightly at the edges. I kept your things because some part of me thought maybe, if you ever found your way back, at least there'd still be something here. I looked around the kitchen. The mugs. The keys are still on the hook. The small dent in the tile near the stove where I'd once dropped a cast iron skillet, and we'd laughed about it for a month. This wasn't manipulation. It wasn't a trap. It was a confession. She hadn't moved on. She'd built herself a shrine, a frozen home full of almost. But this wasn't my home anymore. And I wasn't the man who used to walk through that door and ask what was for dinner. That version of me had already left. I nodded once. Diana turned away, blinking fast. I'm glad you came, she said, barely audible. I reached for the door handle and paused. I believe you, I said. She didn't turn, just stood still. And I walked out, the scent of lemongrass fading behind me like the last note of song you didn't know you were still hearing. 1 year later, the house I now rented on the north side of Savannah smelled like Sunday morning coffee and old vinyl records. I had built new habits. Small, intentional ones. Morning walks before the city woke up. Cooking actual meals instead of surviving on takeout. Calling my parents on Sundays. Playing guitar again, badly, but with actual joy. I wasn't happy in any single blinding moment. I was something better than that. I was okay in a way that sneaks up on you. The way quiet mornings accumulate into a life. One afternoon, Marcus called. Hey, you remember Carter's thing next weekend? You should come. Meet some people. I thought about it for exactly 1 second. Yeah, I said. I'll be there. And I meant it. Some seasons end the way a storm ends. All at once, everything soaked, then suddenly still. What comes after isn't always another storm. Sometimes it's just light, coming through slowly, and you realize you'd almost stopped expecting it. I had stopped expecting it, but it came anyway.